What's one of the most common mistakes that you think that, boy, we would have benefited if we had looked at this a little closer, taken our time, answered this part different? What would you
Yeah.
think is a common mistake that you see?
The first one that comes to mind, and I want to say this first because in some ways it can be the most serious, is messing up that question. This goes for the Form 1023 and the 1023 EZ about foundation classification. So there's a question in both forms where it asks if your organization is described in 509A1 and 170B1A6. Those are both kind of pointing to the same concept. Or alternatively, are you described in 509A2? Now, all of these are both different types of public charity status. And the mistake that I've seen is people not really understanding that question and somehow ending up checking the private foundation box. Because there's a few different public charity options, but if you don't check one of those, you get treated by the IRS as a private foundation. And that has a massively significant set of consequences because the rules for private foundations, they are also 501c3, but they're much more closely scrutinized. They're subject to much more burdensome rules. And even filing the 990PF, which private foundations are required to file, is a lot more expensive, a lot more complex. And there's activities that you can engage in as a private foundation that you could if you're 501c3. So it's just a massively consequential error. And I would say the IRS they've tweaked the form a little bit to try to stop this error from happening. They've really put up at the top the public charity options, which is helpful. However, the form is not the most clear thing in the world, because it's hard to know what do they mean by are we described in 509A1, 509A2. So I get how the mistake happens, but it is a really serious one. And potentially there are ways to correct it. There's something called the Form 8940 that has an option for an erroneous determination of private foundation status. So that's something you could pursue, but it's going to be really an obstacle as an organization is trying to get started, and it's going to take time and money to correct that. I just want to pause and just emphasize kind of how to understand the form a little better and what it's asking for. We've got some videos on the different types of public charity status. We've got articles on the website. So there are resources there. You've got to do some research into what the IRS means by these code sections that they're referencing. But do a real quick primer. 509A1 and 170B1A6, those are generally for organizations that are mainly funded by grants, donations, and that kind of giving. 509A2, generally speaking, works better for organizations that rely on a lot of fee-for-service type revenue, concert halls, museums, that kind of thing. But the key point is almost never do you want to check that private foundation box because the IRS gives you 5 years to satisfy these public charity requirements. So it may not look like it's the best fit right away, but you've got time. So 99.9% of the time, I'm going to work with a client and check one of those boxes and then see how it works. You can switch between public charity statuses fairly easily, but moving between private foundation and public charity is a lot harder. And you've got some time to figure that out, and organizations should use it.